Welcome back, everyone. Today is March 30th, 2026, and I want to begin today with a question that I think every single person watching this video needs to sit with very honestly before we go any further. Serious. What happens when the most powerful military in human history walks into a trap that its enemy spent 20 years building? What happens when the soldiers, the Marines, the paratroopers, the sailors, all of them brave, all of them following orders, all of them somebody's son or daughter or husband or wife? What happens when they step onto an island that was designed specifically to make them bleed? Pause. That is not a hypothetical question today. That is not an analytical exercise. That is the question that the Pentagon is wrestling with right now in real time, that military commanders are losing sleep over right now, that America's closest allies are privately begging Washington to reconsider right now. And it is a question that your television is not asking clearly enough, loudly enough, or honestly enough. So I am going to ask it today, and I am going to answer it with everything I know. Let me start with what we now know is being planned, because the Washington Post published a report just yesterday, March 29th, 2026, that confirmed what many of us watching this situation had suspected for weeks. The Pentagon is preparing for weeks of ground operations inside Iran, not days, weeks. The plans under active consideration include raids by Special Operations Forces and conventional infantry troops. They include the possible seizure of Kharg Island, which handles approximately 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. They include operations to clear Iranian missile sites and mine stockpiles along the coastline near the Strait of Hormuz. They include, and this is the part that Secretary of State Marco Rubio confirmed to Congress this week with words that should make every American pay attention, the possible seizure of Iran's highly enriched uranium from deep inside the country's nuclear facilities. Rubio actually said in a congressional briefing, and I want you to hear these words exactly as he said them, people are going to have to go and get it. People are going to have to go and get it. The United States Secretary of State, the second most powerful foreign policy official in the American government, is telling Congress that American soldiers are going to have to physically enter Iran, go deep inside Iranian territory, and retrieve nuclear material from fortified underground facilities. And the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says these are preparations to give the Commander-in-Chief maximum optionality. Maximum optionality. That is the language of bureaucracy being used to describe what could become one of the most dangerous ground operations in American military history since Vietnam. And the American public, which according to polls is already 56% against this war, deserves to understand with complete clarity what maximum optionality actually means on the ground for the men and women who will be executing it. Now let me take you to Kharg Island specifically, because this is where I believe the most immediate and most dangerous confrontation is building. Kharg Island is a 5-mile strip of coral and rock sitting approximately 26 kilometers off Iran's southwestern coast in the northeastern Persian Gulf. It is roughly 1/3 the size of Manhattan. By itself, stripped of its strategic context, it is an unremarkable piece of land. A few thousand oil workers, long jetties extending into water deep enough for supertankers, pipelines connecting to the major Iranian oil fields of Ahvaz, Marun, and Gaksaran. Storage capacity for approximately 30 million barrels. That is Kharg Island in peacetime. But Kharg Island right now, today, is something entirely different. Kharg Island right now is a killing ground that Iran has been preparing with extraordinary patience and extraordinary detail for weeks, possibly for months, possibly for years. According to multiple people familiar with American intelligence reporting, Iran has moved additional ground forces to the island. Iran has deployed shoulder-fired surface-to-air missile systems known as MANPADs, which are portable, which can be fired by a single soldier, which are extremely effective against low-flying helicopters and aircraft, which are the exact type of aircraft that would be used in an American amphibious assault. Iran has laid anti-personnel mines. Iran has laid anti-armor mines. And critically, those mines have been placed along the shoreline, along the specific beaches and coastal zones where American landing craft would have to bring troops ashore if a ground operation were launched. Let me be very precise about what that means. Iran knows where the Americans would have to land, and Iran has mined those exact locations. That is not defense, that is a trap. A carefully constructed, intelligently positioned, patiently prepared trap. And the Americans, according to their own intelligence sources quoted in CNN's reporting, know it. They know the mines are there. They know the MANPADs are there. They know the additional troops are there. And they are still discussing whether to send their Marines in anyway. Now, I want you to understand the physical geography of what an American assault on Kharg Island would actually look like, because I think when people hear the words amphibious operation or marine landing, they imagine something clean and precise, something from a Hollywood film where the good guys charge the beach and overcome the obstacles with courage and technology. The reality of what would happen at Kharg Island is very different from that image, and every serious military analyst who has looked at this situation honestly has said so. To even reach Kharg Island, American amphibious ships, enormous vessels carrying thousands of Marines and all their equipment and landing craft and helicopters would first have to sail through the Strait of Hormuz, the same strait that Iran has made effectively impassable for commercial shipping through drones and mines and the threat of anti-ship missiles. Retired Admiral James Stavridis, who was NATO's supreme allied commander, one of the most decorated and experienced naval officers in American history, wrote this week that those ships would face massive drone attacks, small boats loaded with explosives and missiles during their transit through the strait. He said that Iranian forces on the island could be easily overcome by the first waves of U.S. forces, but he cautioned, and this is the critical word, he cautioned that the island could be heavily booby-trapped. And then once the first wave of Marines gets through the minefield on the beach and establishes a position, what comes next? The island is only 5 miles long. It is surrounded by water. There is nowhere to retreat to. Every Iranian missile battery within range of the island, and Iran has nearly 1,000 miles of coastline from which to fire, can target the Marines on that island. Every Iranian drone in the region can reach that island. Every Iranian fast attack boat in the Persian Gulf can reach that island. And the Marines, to hold the island for long enough to use it as leverage, would have to endure that sustained assault for not hours, but days, possibly weeks, while the Pentagon talks about maximum optionality in Washington. These are not hypothetical risks. These are the actual assessments of American military commanders speaking to their own journalists, their own analysts, their own government officials. American officials and military experts say there would be significant risks involved in such a ground operation, including a large number of U.S. casualties. A large number. Those are not my words. Those are the words of American officials describing their own plan to their own reporters. A large number of American casualties. And now I want to tell you something that I think is perhaps the most strategically significant detail in this entire situation. The detail that changes everything about how you should understand what Iran is doing and why it is doing it. Iran's parliament speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf posted on Twitter just days ago, and I want you to find this tweet and screenshot it and look at it carefully, because it is one of the most remarkable public statements made by any senior official in any country during any conflict I have covered in 30 years. He said, based on some intelligence reports, Iran's enemies are preparing to occupy one of the Iranian islands with support from one of the regional states. All enemy movements are under the full surveillance of our armed forces. If they step out of line, all the vital infrastructure of that regional country will, without restriction, become the target of relentless attacks. Read that tweet again. Iran's parliament speaker is publicly saying 3 things simultaneously. First, we know your plan. We know which island you are targeting. We know which regional country is helping you. Second, We are watching every single movement your forces make in real time. Every ship, every troop deployment, every logistics movement, we see all of it. And third, if you move, we will not just respond against your forces. We will attack the vital infrastructure of the regional country supporting you. The desalination plants, the power grid, the oil terminals, the airports, the ports, all of it, without restriction. That is Iran publicly announcing in advance that if America attempts a ground operation, the Gulf states hosting American forces will pay a devastating price. And he is saying it not in a classified briefing, not in a diplomatic back channel, not in a private warning to Washington. He is saying it on Twitter for the entire world to read, because Iran wants the entire world, and specifically the Gulf states, to understand exactly what the consequences of supporting this operation will be before it happens. Now, let me connect this to the broader Iranian strategy, because I think Western analysts consistently underestimate the sophistication and the long-term thinking behind what Iran is doing militarily. Iran has spent not weeks, not months, but literally decades preparing for this exact scenario. The scenario of a superior American military force attempting to use its technological and firepower advantage to force a quick, decisive result in the Persian Gulf. And Iran's answer to that scenario, the doctrine they developed over 20 or 30 years of careful study and preparation, is not to try to match America's firepower. It is to deny America the quick, decisive result it needs politically. Because Iran understands something about American democracy that its own leaders sometimes forget. American public support for a foreign military operation is directly tied to the speed, the clarity, and the cost of that operation. When America goes to war and wins quickly and cleanly with minimal casualties, the public accepts it. When America goes to war and it gets messy, when the casualties start mounting, when the weeks turn into months, when the body bags start coming home in numbers that cannot be explained away, American public support collapses. It collapsed in Vietnam, it collapsed in Iraq, it collapsed in Afghanistan, and Iran is betting with everything it has that it can make the same thing happen in the Persian Gulf. And Kharg Island is not the point. Kharg Island is the bait. Iran does not need to hold Kharg Island forever. Iran does not need to defeat the Marines who land there. What Iran needs is for the Marines who land there to take casualties, significant casualties. Enough casualties that the American public, which is already 56% against this war, turns decisively and loudly against it. Enough casualties that the Republican senators who have been quietly warning against a ground operation find the political courage to openly oppose it. Enough casualties that Trump, who has spent his entire political career promising not to send American soldiers into endless foreign wars, faces a choice between his rhetoric and his reality. That is Iran's strategy, not to win militarily, to win politically, through patience, through preparation, through the willingness to absorb punishment and make the cost of continuing this war politically unbearable for the country that started it. Now, let me tell you what the Pentagon is actually thinking as it weighs these options, because I want to be fair to the American military planners who are dealing with a genuinely difficult set of choices. The three main options on the table right now are not equal in their risk or their feasibility. The most realistic option, according to analysts quoted by Al Jazeera, is limited action along the Strait of Hormuz, securing key maritime terrain, using helicopter-borne raids to hit Iranian missile sites and mine stockpiles along the coastal areas near the strait. This is dangerous, but it is at least operationally coherent. It uses America's air superiority and special operations capabilities in environments where they have some advantage. The second option is seizing Kharg Island. Technically feasible, analysts say, meaning the Marines could probably establish a physical presence on the island if they accepted the casualties required to get there. But strategically questionable, because even if America takes Kharg Island, it does not automatically reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Iran still has nearly 1,000 miles of coastline. Iran still has drones, missiles, mines, fast attack boats. Iran can continue disrupting commercial shipping even without Kharg Island. And as retired Admiral Stavridis asked directly, if the idea is to bargain with Tehran for an opening of the strait by threatening to hold Kharg, it is unclear that the remaining Iranian leaders would be cowed by that threat. They might simply refuse to give up anything for Kharg Island, making the entire operation, the casualties, the risk, the international outrage, accomplish nothing. The third option, sending forces deep inside Iran to secure nuclear material, is by the Pentagon's own assessment the least realistic of the three with the forces currently available. Marco Rubio said people are going to have to go and get it, but the military is saying that doing so would require a far larger, sustained ground presence than anything currently being deployed. It would mean going deep inside Iranian territory, into mountain ranges, into fortified underground facilities, against an enemy that has had months to prepare and booby-trap those locations, against an enemy that has 20,000 airstrikes of experience in adapting to American military methods. It is the most dangerous option by a significant margin, and the fact that it is being seriously discussed in congressional briefings tells you everything about how far this conflict has already escalated beyond what was originally presented to the American public as a limited military excursion. And now I want to take you to the dimension of this story that I think deserves far more attention than it is receiving, and that is what America's own allies are saying privately about these plans. Because there is a significant gap, a wide and widening gap between what the Trump administration says publicly about the progress of this war and what America's closest partners are saying behind closed doors. Gulf states are privately urging the Trump administration against putting boots on the ground to occupy Kharg Island, privately, behind closed doors, in frank conversations with senior American officials. They are begging Washington not to do this. And the reason they are begging is not sentiment. It is self-interest. Because Golubov's tweet was not directed at America. It was directed at them. When he said all the vital infrastructure of that regional country will become the target of relentless attacks. Every Gulf leader read that and understood exactly what he meant. Their desalination plants, their power grids, their own oil terminals, their own airports, their own civilian populations who depend on all of those things to survive in one of the harshest physical environments on Earth. The Gulf states that are hosting American military assets that helped enable this war are now facing the very real possibility that if America launches a ground operation, they will pay for it with their own infrastructure, their own economy, and potentially their own civilian casualties. And they do not want that. They did not sign up for that. They signed up for a quick American victory that would establish a new regional order favorable to their interests. They did not sign up to have their desalination plants bombed. And Israel, which has been the most aggressive voice for continuing and escalating military operations against Iran, is itself now expressing private concern. An Israeli source told CNN directly this week that there is concern that taking control of Kharg would lead to attacks by Iranian drones and shoulder-fired missiles, leading to the deaths of American troops. And then the Israeli source said something that I find genuinely remarkable for its honesty. The hope is that they will not take that risk and will instead fire at the oil fields. In other words, the Israelis are hoping that if America sends Marines to Kharg Island, Iran will respond by bombing the oil infrastructure rather than shooting down American helicopters. Because burning oil infrastructure is economically devastating, but it does not create American body bags. And American body bags are what would end this war in a way that nobody in Washington or Tel Aviv wants it to end. Now, let me walk you through what I believe will actually happen in the days and weeks ahead, because I think honest prediction is one of the most valuable things an analyst can offer. And I want to give you my honest assessment based on everything I have studied. The April 6th deadline is 1 week away. The Pentagon is preparing, but Trump has not yet made a final decision on a ground operation. The diplomatic track is producing no meaningful results. Iran has rejected America's 15-point proposal. America has rejected Iran's counter-demands. There is no middle ground being negotiated. The pressure on Trump to do something decisive before April 6th is enormous, coming from Wall Street Journal editorials, from hawks within his own administration, from Israel, from the UAE, from the simple political reality that a president who declared victory and then watched the Strait of Hormuz stay closed for another month will face devastating credibility questions from his own base. But the pressure against a ground operation is also real, and it is coming from his own military commanders who are warning of significant casualties, from Gulf allies who are warning of regional catastrophe, from Republican senators who have signaled opposition, and from markets that are already pricing in danger every time a new deadline is announced. This is the impossible position Trump has painted himself into. He needs an exit. He needs something he can call victory. He needs to be able to stand in front of the cameras and say the mission is accomplished, the strait is open, America won. But the only paths to that victory that his military is presenting him involve sending American soldiers into a trap that Iran has spent weeks preparing. And the question that nobody in Washington seems to have a clear answer to is this: what if the trap works? What if the Marines land on Kharg Island and the casualties are not small and manageable, but large and shocking and visible? What if the body bags come home in numbers that the American public cannot look away from? What if the quick, decisive operation that was supposed to take weeks becomes months? What does Trump do then? What does America do then? Because Iran has an answer to that question. Iran has been preparing its answer for 20 years. And the answer is simply this: we will wait. We will absorb the punishment. We will make the cost of continuing unacceptable. And we will still be here when you decide you have had enough. I will see you in the next video.